Minneapolis. He's a longtime PNW, the Minnesota Post. He does some Vikings, some Twins, and all things out in the Twin City. We welcome Patrick Borzman back onto the program. You can follow him out on Twitter at Borz, B-O-R-Z-M-N for Minnesota. And, hey, man, I'm expecting better weather this weekend when I come out there than we're going to get for the 9 days when I will be trapped out there with a scarf in 3 pairs of long johns for the Super Bowl. But, hey, Ray Lewis is going to be going to the Hall of Fame we get out there, too. So, hey, big doings, though. This is going to be a fun trip out there. The Vikings have been pretty resilient, Pat.
Yeah, they've been last week they won a nice game against the Packers. They got a little help with Rodgers getting hurt. Their defense is pretty good. Their offense has been kind of up and down, and so we'll see how that goes. But that's always expected when Mike Zimmer's a defensive guy, so you would expect that their defense would be pretty good. And let's see how it goes the rest of the way.
Well, I'll tell you what, Keenum came into that game when Bradford got injured again last Monday night. We were scouting that because we had the Bears last weekend, and I don't need to tell you that didn't go well for us on Sunday. I don't know, we might lose to the Browns, the way we've played in our worst games. But certainly looking at the Vikings, seeing what happened to Green Bay, this injury to Rodgers has opened the door for all sorts of possibilities. I mean, Bridgewater back at practice, but Case Keenum, they have played very good football with him, and if he's not turning the ball over, look, he came out of a tree and beat us in Houston a couple of years ago. Literally, he was deer hunting on Tuesday and kicking our ass on Sunday. There's a lot that goes into this, I think, game planning that says, well, what are they going to do offensively? But more than that, how are we going to get anywhere on their defense? Their defense has been real good.
Yeah, and that's what when they brought Zimmer in here, that was the thing. Their defense had not been very good for a couple of years under Leslie Frazier, who had been a terrific defensive coordinator. I think they were kind of in a down cycle of talent, and Zimmer has gotten them back to be a solid defensive team. And yeah, if they can get some decent play out of a backup quarterback who has some experience here, they got a shot. And especially now with Rodgers out. If Rodgers, it looks like he's going to probably miss the rest of the regular season. And if that's the case, then Green Bay is basically an ordinary team. And if you don't have an exceptional team in this division, then it's up for grabs. And the Vikings are as good as anybody now. So we'll see what happens.
I've played this game all week, and I'm going to continue to play it with you. Who's the best player on the Vikings? I don't know, but, boy, there are 4 or 5 guys you can make a hell of an argument for right now as being Pro Bowl players, especially up and down that defense at all 3 levels. They have drafted very, very well. They've managed to stay somewhat healthy on that side of the ball for star players. Not that they need any more after Cook and Bradford and Bridgewater all being injured, but defensively, this is as formidable a group as you'd see probably anywhere this side of like Denver or Seattle or any of the other teams that are really signature defense teams.
Yeah, they have 5 or 6 guys that are really top-notch, Nestor. You're right. If I was going to pick the top 3 or the top player, it would have to be from among, Everson Griffin, who is, a terrific pass rusher and really good against the run. Anthony Barr, who's their great linebacker, and then Harrison Smith, who's the defensive back out of Notre Dame, who's really very quietly become one of the best defensive backs in the league. I mean, he doesn't get a whole lot of notoriety, but he's been to the Pro Bowl, and really solid open field tackler, and really good in pass coverage. I mean, those 3 guys, when you're sitting down and you're on offense and you're trying to come up with a game plan to attack the Vikings, you got to account for all 3 of those guys.
Patrick Borzman covers sports in the Twin Cities area in a multitude of places, including the New York Times. You can follow him at Borz, B-O-R-Z-M-N, out on Twitter. And, of course, we're getting ready for this Vikings game this week. And the Keenum thing and the Bridgewater thing, this is going to play out, right? I mean, Bridgewater's coming back. Who knows how healthy he'll be? Quite frankly, all those whispers about it being career-threatening or career-ending because we heard of the horrors of this injury. But now he's back running around a little bit, and more than that, he brings back this sort of mojo about him, right? Like, he's a real leader around there, very well-liked guy. Everyone's been pulling for him. He's been around the facility. And now they're going to be faced with this decision one way or another because they're going to hang in this race. To your point with Rodgers being out, and it certainly doesn't look like the Lions giving up 52 points to the Saints are going to run away. This is going to be a November, December storyline of drama as to where Bridgewater is and where Case Keenum is, and it looks like Bradford's not going to be anywhere in this conversation the rest of the way with the leg injury that he has. But there's a lot of decisions to be made here and a lot of chess moves, right? Not checkers.
Yeah, well, and the main thing is with Bridgewater is they've got 3 weeks to evaluate him before they have to decide whether or not to activate him. So we'll know by the beginning of November whether or not he's going to be able to help them in the last 2 months. And I'd like to think that they've been very, very careful. I mean, in fact, it's been more than a year since he got hurt. I mean, they've been very, very careful with his rehab. They've been bringing him along very, very, they've been bringing him along slowly. They haven't rushed them. And they're not going to kill him in practice. So I think that when they get to the end of 3 weeks, they're going to have a pretty good idea. And then, we'll see where their offense is at. And I think you're right about Bradford. I mean, he's had the recurring problems. I think that as you're looking long term, you really can't count on the guy. And, best case scenario is Bridgewater's ready to play in 3 weeks and he goes right in the game and he's fine.
Well, you felt like he was a franchise quarterback a year and a half ago.
Oh, yeah.
It really has been unbelievable all the way through these 3 quarterbacks and the running back. I've credited Mike Zimmer, who, I know sort of on a cursory basis, but I certainly like him a lot, and I can see why he's successful. But he really has been he's the great hope to win a Super Bowl there, right?
Yeah, and there's one other, the one change that they made by making Pat Schumann the offensive coordinator seems to have been a big help. And believe it or not, kind of addition by subtraction. By allowing Adrian Peterson to leave as a free agent, something kind of frees up the whole offense. Because with Peterson, and this is the problem that he ran into in New Orleans, in that he's a guy that has to carry the ball a lot in order to be effective. I mean, when he was with the Vikings, and you saw, I mean, he would go, he would carry the ball 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 times, get very short yardage, and then bust one. Well, if you're devoted to that, then you're not devoted to the passing game. And if you're not devoted to the passing game, you're going to have a hard time winning in the NFL. Now, the Vikings have a much more diversified offense. They're able to do some more things, even with a backup quarterback on the field. And that makes them more dangerous. And you saw what happened to Peterson. I mean, he didn't get the carries that he wanted in New Orleans, and now he's in Arizona. So I think that actually, when you got an older running back and like Peterson, and you can't give him the carries that he thinks he needs, you're better off just sending him on his way and thanking him for his service and just going with the younger guys, and it's worked out pretty well for them.
Well, there's a ton of drama around him the last couple of years, whether it was the health, the situation with his child and all the allegations and, the public scorn and, all of that fed into that. That's now kind of all gone, and Zimmer's probably got it right where he wants it. It's all about football right now, right?
Yeah. You eliminate all of that, and because when you have a guy, I mean, clearly he's on the downside of his career. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that, except maybe him. But when you got a guy like that who's got a lot of miles on him, and he says, "You got to do it the way I want to do it," now you got problems. You can't have that on a football team. It's more than any other sport. Football really has to be a collective because you're dealing with more guys, more people on the field, more people in uniform, all of that stuff. And you can't have one guy, particularly a guy who's not the quarterback, try to make it all about him. And so I think they're actually, like I said, I think they're better off without him. And now they got a couple of running backs that have been pretty effective, even with Cook getting hurt. They've got a much more diversified offense, and I think it makes them a better team.
Speaking of guys that have gotten away from Minnesota and went elsewhere, Mike Wallace going to have a little homecoming here this weekend, right? And that didn't work out so well when he was up there, right?
No, it did not. It's funny. They've had problems at that position.
So have we, by the way, which is how he wound up here.
Yeah, it really comes down to that if you don't draft and develop your own guys, it's very, very difficult to bring in guys like that as a free agent and have them fit in. And maybe it's just the nature of the position or the nature of the mindset you have to be good in that position. Because you're also at the mercy of what kind of rapport you can establish. The Vikings are, well, like a couple of places, they've had some interesting people at that position. Let's put it that way.
Patrick Borzi covers all things sports in the Twin Cities area. You can find him at Borz, B-O-R-Z-M-N, out on Twitter. And last thing for you on the football side, at least, we're coming out for the Super Bowl. Boy, that's kind of a heavy thing. You know, if we had ever gotten the Super Bowl here, we'll never have a Super Bowl here, but if we did, there would be a certain something else about getting to the Super Bowl that year, and certainly for all of these teams, all of these years, going back to the 49ers playing at Stanford Stadium 30 years ago, have tried to be the host team the year they're in it, and sometimes it gets heavy. Certainly for this group of Vikings and the Bridgewater thing, it is kind of sitting there with the Rodgers injury, right, for anybody, right?
Yeah, you know, it was funny because in the days leading up to that game, and you know, the Vikings fans and Packers fans are big rivals. Now, the Packers' big rival are the Bears, but the Vikings have kind of made the Packers their great white whale, as it were. And there's all kinds of sometimes good-natured, sometimes not so good-natured kidding back and forth, including Packer fans saying that this will be the first of two home games that the Packers will have or the first of two games that they'll have in Minnesota this year. Clearly, heading the Super Bowl to that. And yeah, I mean, there is some talk around here of, hey, you know, it would be great if the Vikings could get all the way to the Super Bowl and then, you know, be the host. But I'm not sure most people really thought that was realistic. There's a whole lot of stuff had to happen. But people are still talking about it, and you know, I still think it's a long shot, and I think probably a lot of people think it's a long shot. But it does get interesting when the game is in your stadium. And you feel like you want to be the team that has that huge home crowd behind you, even though, of course, the crowd isn't going to be full of Vikings fans because they got all the corporate seats that they got to take care of. But just the fact that it would be in their place would be it's something that was been on their minds. At least it was on their minds before camp started. I don't know how much it's on their minds now because you got to worry about next week.
You better have some hot chocolate waiting for me, some earmuffs, some scarves, all that kind of stuff.
Now, I got to tell you, my man, you know, we've got Skyways here, okay?
I know that. I was at the 92 Super Bowl.
You know, I mean, unless you're staying out by the Mall of America, then you're on your own.
I'm staying out by the Mall of America, so I'm on my own.
Yeah, you are. You're getting on a light rail, and you're coming in, and I would say dress in layers.
Every time the light rail door opens, you know, it's like a freezer's let in.
That's right.
It really is. Absolutely. Patrick Borzi joining us here. Look, I know you're a baseball fan, and we're in the LCS here, and I know you're a native New Yorker, and the Yankees sort of shocking the world here and all this year. You know, it's really interesting from a strategic standpoint what the managers go through now in October, managing everyone in the bullpen and all of the possibilities. You know, Madden got under it this week. Girardi had a scene last week where he didn't challenge. You know, it's a different deal for managers, and I think it's a different deal for the philosophy, the psychology of pitchers, because for them, for the manager, everything changes in the postseason in regard to pitching, and I think it creates a weird conversation that almost doesn't feel like the baseball conversation we have during the regular 162. October's way different for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and I think Twitter has a lot to that too, because I was thinking about this morning, knowing that you and I were going to chat a little bit about this, but here and of course, the middle of the week, because Madden didn't bring in Wade Davis in Game 2, he caught a lot of abuse from people, and then kind of lashed out at folks who he tried to claim that Twitter was writing the story for people. Well, actually not. But what Twitter does is imagine the guys that call a radio show, sports talk radio show, okay? They call in, they talk to the producer, and the producer, if he's a good one, and I'm sure they all, and most of them are, you can usually sense whether they've got somebody who's smart or somebody who's completely unhinged.
Well, by the way, as somebody that took phone calls here for 22 years, this is how I made my living. So I don't take phone calls anymore because I just, Twitter and Facebook are a sewer, and I would rather that be the sewer. You know what I mean? Literally, right?
That's exactly what I was getting at. In that, you can, somebody like you, after probably 2 years, you knew the difference between somebody that was solid and somebody who was going to be a problem on the air, somebody who was going to be a lunatic. And you don't let the lunatics on the air. But Twitter, you don't have that screen. So you've got people, and in every market, there's a percentage of people who think the manager's a moron, no matter what he does. But what it does is that it allows all manner of craziness to suddenly get a public forum. In what I like to call the world's loudest and most obnoxious sports bar. And the thing is, you better have, you have to have thick skin. I covered the Yankees in the late '90s when Joe Torre was the manager. I covered them for the Newark Star-Ledger, and I covered the Mets for a time when Bobby Valentine was the manager in the late '90s. Also, the thick skin that you needed to have for those jobs in the '90s, it better be twice as thick now. Because of social media.
Yeah, well, the sports writers were the bad guys. It was us that was coming to get them. Now the whole world's coming to get them. The same thing for paranoid football coaches. And, even in the Ravens game the other day, the Ravens had a 4th and 1 from the 41-yard line. And I literally went on Twitter and said, I would kick a field. They were down 4 points. And there were 6.5 minutes left to go. I said, I'd kick a field goal here just because I didn't think they could score a touchdown. I thought the way they were going to win a 4-point game was 2 55-yard field goals. Literally. I mean, that was the way my mind played it out. John Harbaugh saw it differently. They got a first down, and, of course, the next play was a pick. And it was an 11-point game, 30 seconds later. And it really is interesting how all of it gets played out now, and we all have instant reaction to it. But in baseball, I don't even think it's that. I think it's the expectation on everyone that you're going to go to the bullpen early and that every game is going to be played like Game 7 because kind of sort of that's the way it's been played the last couple of years. And look, we're in the center of all that with Showalter leaving Britton on the bench last year. We're going to be talking about that until there's a parade here, literally, right?
Right, yeah. And, I like Buck. I mean, I think Buck is one of the smartest baseball people that I've ever had the privilege to talk to. I think also what folks aren't realizing in the postseason is you manage a single elimination wild card the game differently than even a game 2 of a division series or a game 2 of an NL or an ALCS. Wade Davis had to get through 40-something pitches and have to get 7 outs to get Chicago into the NLCS. Well, now the only guy who's talking to Wade Davis and asking him how he feels, and the only guys are the pitching coach and the manager. There's a piece of information that those guys have that somebody sitting on a couch watching the game or watching it in a bar doesn't have.
Well, the same thing if Strasburg had his head in the toilet throwing up. Anybody that says, get your ass out there, come on, do you remember the time you had your head in the toilet? Do you think you could go, you had 110 pitches in you that day? I mean, but the expectation of them to be robo and stratomatic, there's a little reference for you there, Pat.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
about. Yeah, I mean, that everybody's just going to come out there and have a rubber band arm. That really isn't the case, right? I mean, and they are human beings, and there is fatigue, and it is October, but the pressure on all of them in all of these games, especially the bullpens, especially the decision-making, it just gets held up to the biggest spotlight you can imagine these days, because in the old days, you didn't have to worry about that. Your starting pitch, Jack Morris is going to take the ball, and he was going to go to the 7th, and then you were going to worry about it. Maybe the 8th, right?
And we have seen some pitchers in postseason who've, like Verlander, who've been terrific, and Severino, went 7 innings. And you'll probably see a little bit more of that. I think what got people crazy is in the wild card games when suddenly the first sign of trouble, you're in the bullpen. But again, that is an elimination game. You have to play that game like a Game 7 because there is no next game. And then suddenly everybody's kind of a copycat, and you have all this crazy stuff going on, and starting pitchers coming in relief, and Davis trying to get 7 outs, and my point of reference is what Joe Torre did with Mariano Rivera in Game 7 in 2001. He asked Mo to go out and get a 6-out save, not something he had done very often, but at that point, there's no Game 8. So you can go and ask a guy in a situation like that to do something that's a little bit above and beyond. And I'll add one other thing to this. The notion that just because something doesn't work automatically makes it a bad idea is what really ticks off managers and everybody else, because it's still up to the players to do it. And sometimes you can have the right matchup, the right situation, and the guy doesn't do what you think he's capable of doing, or he doesn't do what past performance has said he should be able to do. Guys make mistakes, and to just jump somebody because a matchup didn't work out. You know, I've learned this over a long period of time, that just because something doesn't work doesn't necessarily make it a bad idea. And I think that's the thing that probably makes a lot of these guys crazy.
Well, the Turner bomb, opened the doors for the lackey conversation and for Joe Madden. He is Patrick Borzey. He is Borz, Borzmn, longtime sports writer, now a contributing writer to the New York Times, ESPNW, and from the fighting Twin Cities area, where I'll have my head on a pillow on Saturday night as a little appetizer for the Super Bowl coming up in Minnesota. Always great to talk sports and baseball, football, all that good stuff with you, Pat. We'll certainly check back in sometime between now and when we get there for the Super Bowl. Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, always. Patrick Borzey joining us here, BorzMN, out on Twitter. Go follow him. Good stuff for the Twin Cities sports area. You can find me out on the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. It's a big week here. I go into the Dundalk High Hall of Fame on Friday. Come on out to Costas and celebrate. Beer, crab cakes, crabs, pit beef, music, fun, ball games on, all that good stuff on Friday night, right around 7 o'clock. We'll be at Costas celebrating, me and my family, and all the old Owls and Dundalk alums. Come on out and have some fun. Homecoming is 6 o'clock on Friday, and the ceremony for the Hall of Fame is 4:30 in the auditorium. I haven't been to the auditorium because they've completely demolished and rebuilt Dundalk High. So Friday is going to be a big day around here. You can find me nasty at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We'll be in Minneapolis all weekend, out on social media. And, of course, Luke's on the backfields in Owings Mills. If there's any breaking news, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Colazzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. I'm Nestor. We're WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.